Hello. Today I'm going to be looking at the Stenner ST130 power band resaw. Basically a big band saw that will cut through timber up to the size of a railway sleeper. Although it's not computer controlled, it is digital. It works off a little control panel, and it's pretty accurate. You can cut down to like 0.1 of a millimetre using these controls. Some of the older saws in the company, they like something off the Titanic with big gauges and big wheels that you've got to turn and mess around with. This one's quite user friendly. It's a big scary machine, makes a lot of noise, and obviously it'll cut through things. It wouldn't think twice about cutting your arm off or cutting you in half. But if you operate it safely, keep your hands and arms and loose clothing away from the feed wheel and the blade. It's a big pussycat. It won't do anything to you, it won't harm you at all. Obviously, as I said in other videos, operate it safely, wear your PPE, don't fool around with it, and everyone will be safe. We'll all go home nice and safe to our families. Before we start the resaw up, we've got to check the extraction bags where the sawdust is obviously sucked out and stored. There's 4 of them locked up in a little shelter affair outside. Now you can see the bags. When they get above 2/3, it's best to change them because they get a bit heavy then, and it's a 2-man job. The bags are held on with like the best way to is like a big Jubilee or like cargo strap attachment. So going to the actual saw, when we come to it first thing in the morning, it'll have a sign on saying blade not tensioned, because it's been left in that condition so as not to stress it overnight. We lift the guard up that's covering the blade to protect people getting hands cut, etc. in the night. Little fingers tend to play with things when we're not around. We then go over to the main control switch panel on the wall, turn the power on. Before we do that, obviously we check the compressor oil level, which should be visible in the little sight glass. Press the button and the compressor will fire up, and it'll build up a head of pressure. When it's at the right level, it cuts off automatically. You can see the gauge going up. It goes up to usually about 8, I think, on the gauge. Always make sure the drain cock underneath switched to closed as well before operating the compressor, otherwise the air will just keep coming out. Okay, have a little look at the lubrication oil in the front. We top up using the oil that's provided there, Stenner oil. Doesn't use it very fast, to be honest. A charge of oil should last a good few months. And you can see the pressure building up in the tank, in the reservoir. Once you've got a good head of pressure, the control panel sort of switches on and gets power to it. And now we're going to tension the saw blade by pushing the lever that's under the protective angle iron to the right. It's all wrote on the saw, so you can't go wrong really. And the blade tension should go up to around about 3.5 to 3.9 on the scale. If it's wrong, pull a little knob out at the side of it and you can turn it clockwise to make it go up. As you can see there, it's going up. And if you go too far, turn it anti-clockwise to drop it back down again. All you're doing is adjusting the air pressure, it's tensioning the wheels, which in turn tensions the blade. You see there, we've got it about right, so when we're happy, push the knob back in, stop any further adjustments. And the blade's now nice and tensioned. As you can see, I should be able to ping it when you hit it with anything. You're going to have a walk around check now, just look at the general condition of it, check the emergency stops are all out. There's no build-up of sawdust anywhere. No bits hanging off, nobody's interfered with anything. Usual rule of thumb is if it looks right, it'll be right. Okay, occasionally we do have to open all the covers up to just check the blades not fouled up with sawdust, etc. And to do that, we take the master key out the front of the saw. It's like a fail-safe key. Once that's out, the saw cannot be activated until it's put back in. We use that to open the top panel on the front of the saw that's above the blade. Turn it and push the holding mechanism in. Press the little latch. Push the latch in, which you'll see me do in a minute. There you go, and the cover will open up, and inside you can see the wheel, top wheel, with the blade running on it. The top wheel's the one that moves up and down when you operate the air pressure to tension the blade. You see there's a little build-up of sawdust there, not too bad. And in addition, we can open all the other covers and just check the bottom as well. I think there's about 3 or 4 different covers that we open up to access it. And you can see it's not too bad, there's not a bit massive build-up of sawdust. There's scrapers and pads on the blade as well, which keep the blade clean and lubricated. The oil system also feeds onto that. So, once we're happy, nothing's untoward in there. And we don't have to do this every time we use a saw, just probably once a month, just keep your eye on it, or if it makes any strange noises. So, fasten all the panels back up. We're going to lock the front with the master key and remove it. And place that back into the cut off at the front. Just moving my tripod out of the way there so we can see. So as I say, it's like a fail-safe key. I laughingly call it the nuclear deterrent key, but it isn't. But we turn that back on and then the power's returned to the saw and it can be used. So with the blade tensioned just below 3.5 to 3.9, look above the gauge, you'll see a lever sticking out the front of the saw. That's the tracking lever that adjusts the angle of the top wheel. We don't touch that unless you're experienced when putting a new blade on, etc. If you do, it'll just throw the saw out of alignment. Little look around, all the emergency stops are out. We go back to the main panel. We press the F1 button, that takes you through the menu, and we can see all the previous faults. They indicate that the saw was shut down, and what you're doing by pressing the F1 button is resetting everything. There weren't faults as such, it's just telling us basically that the saw was switched off. So there's the main menu, as you can see. We're going to set the saw up, so we press the set button, F3. We're going to move the fence, so we go to F2. We don't touch the datum button, because basically that sets up all the distances, you've got to recalibrate everything. We're going to go to the move button, which is F2. As you see there, the fence is set at 59.3. If we don't want to move it, we press return, it takes us back a stage. And if we do want to move the fence, obviously we press fence, move, and then in and out. Okay, moving the saw out moves it away from the blade, makes the gap wider. As you can see, pressing out and holding it moves it at a large distance in one hit. If you want to move it a small distance, you just tap the button gently to move it small increments. And that actually opens up to about, as you can see, it's about 300mm, just short. That's the distance from the fence to the blade. Pressing the in button, and again if you hold it, it just keeps scrolling along quite merrily, quite fast, bringing it in a large distance. And when you get somewhere near, just tap it again gently to move it small increments. Unless you come really close to the blade, within a couple of mil, it won't actually touch the blade. As you can see there, it's not quite touching. And the measurement's actually 4mm. So, you've got the gist of moving the fence in and out. Here you can see we're just playing around with it a little bit. And if you tap the button really slowly, you can get it to move in like 1/10 of a millimetre. Quite an accurate saw. You can see there we're down 25 mil. We're happy we've set the fence at the right distance. We return up a stage in the menu, press set again, and this time we're going to adjust the feed speed. This is the speed that the rollers rotate at that pull the timber through the blade. As you can see there, it's 10 meters per minute. We're going to take it up by pressing increase. The higher the speed moves the timber through the blade faster, and we have high speeds for things like batten thin pieces of timber. Thick stuff like railway sleepers, etc., we have to have really slow to allow it to get through the blade nice and smoothly. So pressing the decrease obviously takes the meters per minute down. See that's on minimum 5 meters. And there you can see the feed roller that grips the timber and pulls it through the blade when it's in motion. We'll look at that shortly. In this segment we're going to check the saw blades running straight and true by using the jog button. We've got the control panel, scroll through until we see the track, come up on F2 button. We could accept it if we're happy, but we're going to press jog, the F1 button, and what that does, it just runs the blade while you've got your finger on the button. It doesn't constantly run, it'll only run the amount of time you've got your finger on the button. Just gives you enough time to look at the blade to see whether there's any problems. Okay, you can check, make sure it's not catching the sides, not making any funny noises, it's not going to run out of true. When you took your finger off the button, you can check the trough of the blade, the bottom of the sort of wave shape is in line with the 2 brass dots on the saw table. That means it's running straight and true. When we're happy, we can start the saw. And by doing that, we go back to the panel. We now press accept, the F2 button, and keep pressing run until the saw kicks in. It'll take a while to get up to full speed. But once we're happy, you'll hear the pitch of the saw change. You'll know it's up to full speed after about 30 seconds. At this point, we're happy with the tracking, but you can adjust the feed and the fence so that you can adjust your distances you want to cut if you want to, if you're not already set it up. There's nothing wrong with doing your adjustments while the blade's running, as long as you don't put your hands anywhere near it. The fence won't touch the blade at any point. So the blade's been running for about 20 seconds, it's up to full speed. When we look at the control panel, we see the feed is flashing. Basically that means we're going to press the button and that tells the resaw power feed head we're now ready to start cutting. Nothing will happen however because there's an optical safety beam. It senses when there's timber on the bed of the saw. When it senses timber there, it'll move the power feed in. If it doesn't sense there's anything there, the power head will stay to the left out the way. As you can see, as soon as the timber goes on, it senses it's there and the feed head moves in. Like so. It'll grip the timber and pull it through the bed. We'll look at that a bit closer in a minute. Once the timber's gone through the blade, the beam's unbroken and the power feed moves away to the left again, just clearing the deck. This can sort of be an issue when we're doing thin pieces of timber because it doesn't break the beam. So to get past that little problem, there's a sensor cover. It's a little piece of metal we flip over and it basically interrupts the beam permanently, telling the saw that there's something there, and it keeps the power head in place while there's thin pieces of wood on the bed. It's always advisable to have 2 people operating this saw when we're doing stuff like this, one feeding the saw, one on the other side taking the timber off. When we've finished with the feed head, we can switch it off at the panel and unbrake the beam and it'll move to one side again. Once we move the panel out the way, you'll see it move back. You can adjust the feed speed and the distance on the fence while the saw's running. You'd have to stop the saw to do it. As you see here, we're just demonstrating and doing it with the blade moving, bringing the fence in, etc. You just got a little glimpse of the manual feed adjustment wheel there, and that, by turning that, basically you can move the power feed head in a little bit tighter if you need to make sure the distance is right for the timber. You don't want it too tight on the timber, however it is spring loaded, so if it is too tight it won't damage it, it just leaves a deeper indentation in the side of it. And you'll see here me using it to adjust the distance. So moving the wheel clockwise to the right moves the power feed head in a little bit closer to the blade, grips the timber tighter. See now that distance is closed up a little bit. And turn it anti-clockwise to the left, moves it out a little bit, slackens it off. Even when using the power feed head, you're best having a little push stick just to get it through that last couple of mil. You can't rely on the power feed to drag it all the way through, because there's always a little bit at the end it doesn't quite grip. As you can see, it's moved out slightly there. When we're cutting a piece of timber, the control panel is usually pretty accurate. It's calibrated, but we can check it by doing something called notching. What we do, we offer the piece of timber up to the blade gently, keeping it tight against the fence at the back, and we just take a little bite into it with the blade, only a couple of mil or half an inch or so. Get the tape measure, double check the measurements, as you see there, double checking the measurements. If we're happy, we're going to carry on feeding the timber through the saw in the normal way. If we weren't happy, we'd adjust the fence accordingly and the power feed to make sure it's gripping the timber okay. So when we're ready, everything's been sorted out, the power feed's coming into play, it's gripping the timber, and I'll pull it through the blade. Obviously it's one person working on his own there, so he uses a push stick to push it that last little bit through the fence, through the saw. Going to look at using a tilt jig to cut timber from corner to corner to make some roofing products. The jigs are made of angled pieces of timber, as we've already cut previously, fastened to a base. We've got different ones for different sections. Here you can see the 2x2 one for square section. We have them for 3x3, 4x4, and we also have ones for oblong timber, 3x2, 4x2, etc. First job, we put the jig on the table, nice and squarely, so it's straight. Line the blade up in the gap, and we lightly grip it in place with the feed roller and the fence. We don't turn the power feed on. Once we've got it in place and the saw's running, we don't use the power feed to feed the timber through, obviously. We just do it by hand. The first job's to notch it to make sure we are cutting true corner to corner. We check it, and if we're happy, we'd just feed it through by hand. The guy on the feed end pushing it into the blade, and another guy on the other end pulling it through. And hands are not to be put near the blade at any time. We use a push stick necessarily. We can adjust the position of the blade relevant to the jig by moving the fence or the roller either way from side to side. Just gives you a sort of slight adjustment to make sure you're cutting it square. Once we're finished cutting, we can release the feed head and the rollers slightly, just take the pressure off, and we can take the jig out, put it safely. We can either switch the saw off or we can carry on doing something else, depending what sort of work we've got on. The saw can be stopped at any time by hitting one of the emergency stop buttons if there's a problem, but the more normal way to shut it down is by going to the panel and pressing the F4 button or the stop button under the LCD panel. This cuts off the feed to the motor and allows the blade to stop gradually. without causing any problems. As you can see by the video, it's slowing down, comes to a controlled stop. Once it's come to a complete stop, we move the power feed in closer to the blade. We lower the guard over the blade to prevent people sticking their fingers in it when it's unattended. As you can see, the yellow guard's been lowered right down. Put the warning sign in place, because the next thing we're going to do is relax the tension on the blade by going back to the control panel on the saw and pushing the lever to the left, which dumps all the air pressure out and slackens the blade off. There's no tension on the blade now, so it won't crack or distort if the weather's hot at night or cold. As you can see, all the warnings are coming up on the control panel to tell you that it's been switched off. Now go over to the main supply on the wall, switch everything off, and the power to the panel's gone off. If we were leaving it for any length of time, obviously we'd isolate it or take the key out of the bottom panel to make sure nobody else can use it. So we've had a look at the saw. Now we're going to give you a little bit of information about the compressor, just a few little daily bits and pieces we've got to do. The obvious thing is check the oil in it. We've looked at that earlier, the sight gauge on the front. And there you can see the air pressure in the tank. What we also have to do at the end of the day, when everything is shut down, is drain any excess air that's stored which may contain moisture. As you can see there, bottom left hand side of the tank, there's a drain cock or drain valve. I'm going to push the compressor back, as you can see, just to give us a clearer view of the valve. And when the stopcock on the valve's up and down across the pipe or the valve, that means it's closed. Slowly turn it anti-clockwise to the left, in line with the valve and the pipe, and that'll let the air and the moisture out. Do it gently, because if you whack it open, it'll make a really loud noise and there'll be a load of water spurts out of you. When we've finished, obviously fully close it, and it can be left overnight till the following day when we come to reuse it. Sometimes the compressor won't start, and I've been asked why that is. Well, as well as checking all the breakers on the wall, etc., on top of the compressor, above the gauge, there's a red button that's also cut out. Sometimes it trips, so just simply pull it up and the compressor should kick back into life. As you can see, she's away again there, no problems.